Hello and welcome to Crow Jam, the podcast where two sisters try to develop and pitch a board game concept in under an hour. I'm Miriam.
I'm Georgia.
We're Big Crow Games, and you can find us at Big Crow Games on Twitter, or find some of our creations on our itch page at big-crow.itch.io. Georgia, trick or treat?
Ooh, trick.
This
Do
was
a flip!
ruse for opening the concept of the episode.
Yes, it is October for real this time.
For real.
Welcome to spooky season, and we're doing one of our patented Halloween episodes. How's this one going to work?
Yes, Halloween shenanigans. Okay, so I asked you to come up with double the prompts for this episode. A trick and a treat for both theme and mechanic. So something that you would really like to see or make, and something that maybe you're not so keen on. And I've done the same, and we're going to flip some coins and hopefully not end up with the most dreadful, dry Euro game.
Making our nightmare game. So are we going to say what the choices are, or are we going to flip the coins and only say what the result is? Like whether it's the trick or the treat?
Oh, what's more interesting?
I think it might be more fun if we don't reveal what the other choice was.
Okay, all right. So we're starting with your mechanic ideas, and we're just going to flip a coin. Heads is treat?
Heads is treat, tails is trick.
Okay, here goes.
Coin is flipping, and it comes up tails, which means that the theme that I am contributing is space exploration.
Okay. All right, shall we do my theme?
Yes. I'm sorry, Miriam, it's tails.
Oh no! Oh god. Yeah, this is truly the worst of all possible worlds. Okay, so my mechanic for trick was historically accurate.
So we have to make a historically accurate space exploration game. And then it's time to flip for our mechanical ideas.
Maybe if we get the heads, we can do some judicious swapping.
For that to work, we'd have to get a heads. I have flipped a tails, which means that our game has to include a points tracker.
Fine. Okay, so
and we're flipping for your mechanic came up heads.
Okay, so that means stacking things.
So yeah, you said putting things on top of other things.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so I guess it's time to start brainstorming. So obviously when I think like historically accurate space exploration, the thing that immediately comes to mind is like the space race of the 1950s through 1980s. You know, the sort of Cold War space race. Mm-hmm. Potentially there's a version of historically accurate space exploration where we like do it about now. This is the worst thing that's ever come out of my mouth. Like, make a game about Elon Musk.
Okay, sure. Taking it entirely another direction. What if we cheated a little bit on the theme, and by space exploration we were just talking like astronomy, astrology, like charting constellations, or like navigation by the stars?
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I think we could also think about space exploration in the sense of just sort of sending out rovers and stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be about manned space travel.
Or it could be inner space, which is the oceans.
Hollow Earth, and we live on the inside. It's my favourite conspiracy theory. The other thing we could do, which would be a big ol' fudge, would be to do, like, a speculative thing. So we tried to sort of make something that was about the future, but that was sort of accurate in some way. That is probably the least interesting way to combine the themes to me.
Okay, sure. Now, okay, I think I'm just going to say, I feel like possibly if we run the tapes, I said mechanic first and you heard theme, but I'm not sure that was the case.
I think that might be what happened. Either way, it's
Oops.
3 tails and a head.
Yeah, this is true. But then we would have ended up with what? Party planning, historically accurate party planning.
Yeah, which is just, like one of those games that, like, you've got to get the right thing for the Countess's ball.
Oh my god, I think that we've just received a game that might not be too dissimilar to that. There's Obsession, it's
yes,
like a Regency.
Yes.
It's bizarre. Yeah.
I have not played it, but I went to a board game cafe with some friends from my partner's work. Lovely people, very different tastes in board games to me.
Okay.
We still had a good time and we managed to find some middle ground, but the person from Andy's work was showing me Obsession and just talking about how much she loves it and how it's like playing a Jane Austen novel, and I was like curling up and dying inside. So here is the first thing that came to mind, and I'm not quite sure yet how I would incorporate the points tracker, but I'm imagining something with a really great, like, sort of socialist realist / propaganda poster art style, and it's like a rocket builder. So you have parts and ways of acquiring parts, and you stack them up to make the best rocket, and maybe your opponent has American parts. And you are in some way trying to stack them up to build the best rocket. And
I think that more or less has to be it, right?
It's called Space Race. Okay, podcast over. Shortest one ever. I think we probably should start the timer.
Oh yeah, we should go.
Give me 1 minute to... She has started now. So yeah, like... I think that we would want to make it more complicated than that. Maybe it's to do with, like, the way you acquire your parts, and it has to score with a points tracker, so I guess maybe there has to be, like, you get this many points for this type of part, and this many points if your rocket holds together. Maybe you have to do a launch at the end where you shake the table.
Oh, that's really good. Okay, yeah, I think that I like this idea. Like, we don't, because it doesn't need to go too heavy on mechanics. Like, it's going to be largely a stacking game with some like like crunch in terms of like how you gain things.
Yeah.
Maybe a sort of cycle. A game which comes to mind, and it's not really similar necessarily, but there's this one called Project L. Have you seen this?
I have seen this.
And it's sort of like a puzzle level up thing where when you complete like one tile by like filling it with pieces, you get to buy a new piece, and like you can choose from a selection, and that, and then you get a new tile, and that the pieces that you get hopefully help you to fulfill a new tile and get more pieces, and like the sort of collection of pieces that you have is what's moving along with you.
The thing that I don't want us to do is kind of fudge this challenge. I feel like we set ourselves something tricky to do. We made it so that we could have just as easily had the opportunity to make a game that was completely in our wheelhouse. Yeah. And I think we can take this in a direction that is still, very squarely a Big Crow game. But I don't want us to, like, drop the ball particularly on historically accurate.
Yeah, right.
So I think we do have to do something that maybe ties into the Cold War, unfortunately. I think we might... I mean,
that's... Yeah, in terms of Space Race, I think we're both probably fairly equally uninformed. But your general historical knowledge is gonna
I mean,
trump mine.
I have a PhD in the history of the Cold War. But yeah, I don't know a lot about the space race.
Look, all right.
It's fair. I don't know all that much. But yeah, like I think, you know, we can make some concessions to what we do know, and maybe, you know, lampshade a little bit what we don't know. But I feel like I would want it to have some, you know, the hallmarks of a historically accurate game of the kind that neither of us like. You know, like, maybe there's cards with really ugly art of, like, Stalin on it.
The name is, like, the name of a city or location that's sort of, like, not all that well-known now, but was really central at some key stage of history.
Yeah, I don't think we have to go that far, but I would like there to be something, maybe something in the play being maybe, like, asymmetric.
Oh, you mean, like...
asymmetrical in some way, so that, like, maybe each, like, the example that I would think of would be that, let's say that the game is in some way influenced by how many workers and how much money you have, is that the player representing the United States would start with a lot more money, and the player representing the USSR would start with a lot more workers. Like, that is completely abstract and might have nothing to do with what we design, but that's what I mean by a kind of asymmetrical idea for it.
I mean, that honestly sounds like, just on a mechanical tied into theme thing, sounds pretty dope. It sounds like it also might be a worker placement game. If I can suggest either an addition or an alternative, could we make the Cold War element be that there's kind of like it's like somewhat hidden play, and there's like an espionage element?
Oh, that would be
like,
really cool.
You can steal like concepts or parts or something,
or scientists, maybe, like
another player, maybe by like committing resources to spying or like I don't know, to like education or what have you.
Yeah,
sort of.
I like that. I think that takes it in a more ambitious direction than just like, this is a game where you're competing countries trying to build a better rocket. Like, I still like the idea of it having this like completely silly, very Big Crow-esque part of it, where you build a rocket out of interconnecting pieces, and at the end you shake the table to see if it holds together. But I do like the idea of there also being, something a little bit more, with just a little bit more teeth to it. And I do love the idea of there being like corporate espionage, or I guess like international espionage. It's not corporate. In it.
So it could be something where like, you're in a race to construct the parts and then stack the parts of your rocket, and maybe you can't see what your opponent is doing, but you can.
There's an iron curtain between you.
But you can spend like maybe like an entire turn to just spy or whatever, and if they've completed a part that you haven't completed yet, you can like sort of do that for free, or I don't know.
No, I like that. Here's a possible thought, riffing on the sort of throwaway thing that I just said about workers and money. Is money what you need to like acquire parts, but workers what you need to attach them to your rocket, or something like that? So you can sort of, maybe there's a trade-off there in terms of what you can do and with what resource.
So money equals parts, and workers equals like work, basically.
This is so true. Workers equal work, bestie. You are right.
I'm just trying to like take some notes so that I can refer back to things.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
I mean, that is, I'm not 100% wedded to that idea or anything, but things that we've said so far that I've liked is definitely the element about espionage in some way. The idea that you can't see what each other is doing, or you can't see it easily. So having like a divider between the two players, which I do think it would be very funny to call it the Iron Curtain. And I definitely see this as having quite a silly building game as
Yeah.
part of it. I don't see the rocket element of it as being super duper serious. Like, I would rather it was sort of a load of, like, oddly shaped flower pots and nose cones and stuff. And maybe, you know, like, maybe they're color coded or they have to go in a particular order and you can add, like, a certain number of rockets. I recently played Junk Art, which is a game you have recommended a few times on the podcast, I think, and your recommendation is 100% rock solid. It's close to a perfect game. But I do like the idea that maybe, like, you could put lots of rockets, like lots of engines on it, and try and make one. I guess that would give it, like, a more solid base when you shook the table or something, or it would count towards the points tracker. You know, like, you get points per sort of properly installed engine.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, so we sort of want to know, like, maybe a little bit what our structure looks like. Like, is it a, you know, like a buckaroo? Okay, is it like a situation where you're hanging things onto a pre-existing structure? Is it a thing where you're stacking things up?
I was imagining a tower, and maybe with, like, there are certain parts that it has to have to be successful, like the nose cone has to be on the top or whatever. But I'm also open to it being done in other ways.
Yeah.
So
I think it's just the important thing, and you know, again, this is one of those things that, like, could be worked out with testing and whatnot. But to some extent, we can imagine, like, okay, if we're doing this thing where you shake the table at the end, is there some way to increase the chances that that's not just going to be an avalanche?
Yeah. So I guess what I was originally thinking when, like, the idea for the game first popped into my head was that the parts would almost be interlocking. Like, it would be like stacking up flower pots or something.
Oh, okay. So maybe it could be sort of like a Lego style situation, like obviously, like, everything is not necessarily cubes, but maybe there's some kind of, like, fitting that is present on, like, each side of each thing, and then
like maybe each thing's just got sort of a grooved or hollow bottom or something, so that you know that you stand a relatively good chance of getting it attached. It's just, like, how good the fit is.
Yeah.
Or something
It could
like
even
that.
be like there's multiple styles of thing like that just kind of make all the parts look kind of cool and greebly and make your rocket look cool and greebly.
Yeah.
But also serve, like, a structural purpose.
Yeah. And I think also having things maybe in sort of different sizes, and you can try and, you know, you can work towards having a game that's got a design that's got a stable base. Things of that sort. So that there are tactical decisions you can make to make your rocket more stable, but they might not always be perfectly aligned with the decisions you would make to make your rocket high scoring.
Yeah.
So that there's, like, you know, some tactical bite to it in terms of what you choose. Like, do you take a bit of a risk to maybe make a higher scoring rocket that might explode on launch?
Okay. Should we do a little bit of imaginary play? I know it's early doors to be doing that, but I think it might help us.
I think it might help. And also, I feel like the core ideas come quite quickly, so getting into more sort of experimental stuff is not a bad idea.
So let's say I'm the Soviet Union. You're the West, and I guess specifically the United States. So I've started with a small amount of money. Let's say 5 space bucks.
Yes.
But many workers. I've got like 16 workers over here. What you got?
Well, I've got 16 space bucks, but only 5 workers.
Okay. So I guess there's a question about whether you can gain more of a certain thing, right? Like, can you spend some of your money to get workers?
Yes, I think so. And I think conversely, you could convert workers into money. Or maybe there's just some kind of different economy style, if you see what I mean. Like,
yeah.
But then I think there needs to be ways for each of us to get both if the resources are expendable.
Yeah. maybe completing parts gives you sort of floating points that you can put into different, either spacebooks or workers.
Yeah, I like that.
So completing parts could be like what helps you level up your operation.
Yes.
And then I'm really low on parts, and I can only afford one thing. So I'm just going to start by getting me this big square engine block that I think is going to make a stable base. But because I've got a lot of workers, it takes me no time at all to get that built.
Okay, but you have spent some quantity of your money resource in order to do so.
Yeah, I've spent 4 of my space bucks to do that. I've used 4 of my workers to put it on my structure, and in doing so, I've gained myself 2 floating points that I think I'm going to use to hopefully get me some more money.
Okay, so I wonder if to take this into slightly more into Eurogame territory, rather than the points being convertible into money or workers, maybe you can put them into a system that generates money or workers or something like that. Okay. so that it has a longer term implication, because otherwise, yeah, sure. If you're always, say you spend 4 points for a part but you spend $4 for a part and it generates 2 points, you're always going to be spending down, kind of thing, which I guess is historically accurate.
Yeah,
I wonder.
I guess we could have a sort of machine, and you put your little, point tracker things in there, and then there's an output that happens every turn.
Yeah, or you could spend them on cards that were sort of power cards. So it would be a policy free university, and then you get more workers, or a policy I don't know, economic strictures, and then you get more money.
Yeah, love it.
To make it more like a historical game, I guess.
Yeah. God, we're making a weird game. I knew that this episode was going to be amazing in the most scary possible way,
It was going to take our creativity in new directions. I mean, the other thing that I wanted to toy with is whether there's other ways to make the acquisition of new parts more exciting. Instead of buying them with resources, is there some other thing that we could do, either with maybe some randomness modeling, or by having tasks you have to complete, or something that that just adds a little bit more texture to the idea of getting the parts. I don't know what you think about that.
I think that could be cool. I think something popped into my mind and I lost it.
Yeah, I've sort of been having that experience as well, because I sort of like the idea of we've done things like this in our games before, where, say, to acquire item X, you have to achieve condition Y using things you already have. And I wondered whether that would kind of translate over, but I feel like that would be adding potentially 2 or 3 new systems to the game, so it might not be the right move.
All right, how about this? This is very, maybe doesn't feel like it's necessarily, I guess, super balanced in terms of historical accuracy, but the cards you were talking about, the policies free university or whatever, what if one side of these cards has the policy that will get you some kind of I don't know, permanent bonus to workers or something, and the other side just has a picture of a part that you can get if you if you mortgage your policy, you can get you
yeah, a part. I don't know. No, I really like that, and I also like it because I think then you could have each of the 2 powers have a custom starting deck that you could carefully balance with design and testing. Design and testing not shown. That should be our our podcast like tagline.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day that like it's a fairly regular occurrence for you to play a game at the cafe and be like, oh, I really like the idea, I'm just not so sure about the execution. With us, you don't. You just get the idea, no execution.
Yeah, we're just all the good bit, none of the hard bit. That's what makes us the best game design company in theory. Anyway, yeah, so there would be these two like balanced starting decks, and then maybe also ways to acquire new cards. I think there would probably have to be ways to acquire new cards.
Yeah. Maybe the espionage element could be not only like gaining knowledge for rocket building, maybe it could literally just be stealing cards. Like, oh, they seem to have some kind of idea over there about free education.
And I'm
not sure, but maybe we should give it a go.
Yeah, I really like that because it seems like then espionage could just be a card that was in everyone's deck, but maybe it has like a relatively good part on the other side. So it's like a tough decision to make. But then you could maybe use it to get a better part from the other side. Or I guess maybe to like take a glance at your opponent's rocket and then take the matching part, like one part that you could see on there.
Yeah.
That would be quite fun.
I was sort of imagining that. I think it might potentially be fun to kind of have like options about how you undergo espionage, but maybe we are already making this quite complicated.
Well, so. I think that could just be multiple cards, right? Like you could just have one that's like technical espionage that just lets you take a peek and try and copy a part from your opponent's rocket, or one that's like, you know, kind of a riskier, like a higher risk espionage where you can take a card. I think that you could just have those as like balanced cards in the deck. Now, is this sort of taking on deck buildery elements? Like, do you always have access to all your cards, or do you like draw up a hand at the start of your turn?
Oh yeah. I think perhaps this, we don't want to make it too deep. I was sort of imagining there being like a couple of cards on display, and like when you gain points or you know whatever it is you get from like completing one stage of your rocket, you can use those to gain cards.
Yeah, okay, I like it. That makes sense, and I think it's very neat. Okay. So now that we've like puzzled it out,
perhaps the points tracker, like maybe you get points on the points tracker when you complete a bit, and you have the option to spend points, like go down in points in order to buy like upgrades. So it's slightly engine buildery in that sense that you need to like expend something in order to yeah
that does make sense. And it also I wonder if maybe like some of the better like abilities or upgrades maybe have like a point cost as well as an opportunity cost. So like if you want to spy and take a card from an opponent, you don't just miss out on the part that's on the other side. You also have to spend a victory point to make the cost a little bit more real.
Okay, yeah.
It doesn't have to be that, but that was something that we could do if it felt like there was a balance issue.
Yeah.
And obviously balancing this would be one of the biggest challenges of making it, but I think it would also be one of the most interesting ways of making it, especially if you were trying to do it in a way that was thematic, so that so that it had like some asymmetry to it. Now, it's totally cool if we have, and it might be a better game for it. Have we dropped the sort of money and workers idea, and are we just using the cards, or are money and workers still a factor?
My imagination of it still has the money and workers in there.
Yeah, and the cards just let you generate more of them.
Yeah, I think that most of the card abilities would just be something to do with money and or workers.
Okay, yes, this
Like
makes...
maybe some of them would be like, you know, that would give you the permanent option on your turn to like spend a certain amount of money to get more workers, or vice versa.
Yeah, okay. Or like obtain money or obtain workers, or things like that. Okay, cool. Now that we have, I think, added a lot more texture to what we were working with, do we want to revisit imagining a turn?
Ooh, yes. Okay.
So we're back where we were. You're the USSR. I'm the United States. And I am about to take my turn. So I've built the first stage of my rocket. It's got like boosters on the bottom. I have 16 money and 5 workers, which means I have enough money to trade for a good part, but I don't have enough workers to attach it to my rocket. So I'm going to use the reverse side of one of the cards that I have in my hand to convert 5 of my money into 5 workers. Now, does that use my complete turn? It seems like yes.
I'm not sure. I'm sort of imagining that cards, or at least some cards, could almost be like permanent power-ups, that they let you do a thing on your turn once, maybe.
Okay. So actually I turn over the card that says once per turn you may convert X dollars into workers.
Yeah.
And maybe I've also previously turned over a card, or maybe I started with a card that's like once per turn, gain dollars.
Yeah. So then in so doing, you have maybe got yourself the workers. I guess if you're gaining workers on your turn, maybe those workers only like enter the workforce on your subsequent turn.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I
was thinking about that, like, are workers spent, or do they like go into timeout? They're
that's
different
also
from
a
money.
good question. Yeah.
It might be that maybe that you have to like cycle them into a timeout space and shift them along, so and then maybe one of the permanent power-ups you could get is like your workers, they're just so full of patriotism, the 5-year plan is completed within 4 years, and you can put them in timeout for one less turn.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's how I imagine it. Like in a kind of worker placement-y, this isn't quite like getting into worker placement, but like, yeah, you have a permanent sort of store of workers, but they're only available like
when they're not tiled.
Yeah. So timeout zone, and then like some kind of upgrade to that.
Okay, so having done that, I use my money and workers to buy a part for my rocket and attach it to my rocket. And I'm aiming for... I mean, is the goal height? Is it sort of most parts on rocket? Are we thinking that there's going to be like, points for color sets or for types of part? Your rocket obviously wouldn't be valid unless it had, let's at least say, like engines and a nose cone.
Yeah.
So it also has to be valid.
I think that so if I take a super basic example of like a points tracker game, Ticket to Ride, when you complete a route, you score some points based on the length of that route. So we could have like during play, you build a certain part, you score the points for that part, and those points can be spent to get like cards that are, abilities or upgrades.
Okay.
But also at the end of Ticket to Ride, you have your destination tickets that are like, if you have completed, I don't know, Denver to Oklahoma. I don't think those are 2 cities in Ticket to Ride, but you get a certain number of points.
Okay.
So it's like there's scoring during the game and then there's scoring at the end of the game, right?
Yes. Okay, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, I think. And also could make for some interesting stuff in the design where maybe, like, again with the asymmetry idea, like the different powers have slightly different win conditions, or that you pick a random win condition, like at the start of the game, you pick from a small deck of win conditions that's known to you and secret to your opponent. Things you could do things like that to kind of spice it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I like this.
I'm going to leave that sort of, I guess, not necessarily in the mix for the moment, because I think with our theme, it might get a little silly if there's objectives that are just like your rocket has the most parts or whatever.
Fair enough.
I something like that would be cool, but like we could also make it a bit more straightforward, just like, yeah, I'm not quite sure. Some sort of objective that's like is shared but reasonable.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, the objectives could maybe be comparative in some way, though, to sort of reflect the kind of race element of it. Like, if you have more of this type of part than your opponent, or if your rocket is taller or something.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That might be interesting, sort of thematically. Or it might be boring. I'm not sure.
I mean, this isn't going to be a boring game, even if you're...
No.
Well, okay, obviously, some people would not like this, but...
I do feel like we've sort of, we're moving towards a very us version of a historically accurate space exploration game.
I mean, this was always going to happen. I don't think we were going to make, Twilight Imperium or... Wait, no.
Sidereal?
What's Apollo?
Yeah, Twilight Imperium. When we were texting each other with our suggested good and bads, I was like, if we get the wrong set of roles, we're gonna have to make Twilight Imperium.
I really know nothing beyond the fact that it's a space game.
I know that it's a space game with a big box that takes a long time to play, and that's everything I need to know I don't want to play it.
There's a section in the shop. On the whole, our shop is very helpfully organized into like co-op games, kids games, abstract games, new releases. There's just a whole section of black boxes that's space.
Funny. Okay, so I've imagined my turn, and now play passes over to your side of the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, so I guess I am kind of cash poor, having spent a decent amount of my money. So I'm looking at my part options, and I really don't have that many. But I have a few points on the points tracker, so I'm going to spend a handful of those and gain myself a card that I can see that will just allow me to get money on my turn. And my plan is to just hopefully use that, at least for the time being, as like a permanent upgrade that will let me get money so I can hopefully buy parts.
Okay.
Yeah. And then my workers built a thing last turn, so I'm gonna, I guess, like cycle them out of timeout, depending on like how long timeout takes place for.
Move them along the timeout tracker or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like those turns feel relatively robust. I feel like I understand what's happening in the game. I understand what the different parts are. The next question I have is, when do we decide that the rockets are done?
Yeah.
When do we decide the rockets are done? And then what do we do next? Do we keep the shaking the table idea? Is that too silly?
I really like that idea.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that you feel that way.
Sick. I kind of... Okay, so obviously the most fun and historically accurate end game condition is purely someone decides that their rocket is ready, and it may or may not be. I guess it could be you decide that your rocket is ready.
You're absolutely right that is kind of how it has to be. Like, someone kind of has to hit the red button, don't they?
The trouble with this is that, like, you would hope that... Okay, I've started wondering whether it would need to be played on 2 separate tables, because somebody decides their rocket is ready, they shake the table. If their rocket collapses, then the other person can keep building without, like, the space race having been lost, right? Like,
I think it would have to be that someone at the end of their turn declares, like, we're going to launch, and then that gives the other player the turn, so they are then able to, let's say, like, trade in any card for a nose cone and put it on the top.
Okay.
So that whatever both players have, like, you know, that you hear that your enemy is about to launch their space program, and you're like, oh, well, shit, we've got to do it. Like, it does not matter if we're ready or not. Like, they can't beat us, so we're launching. But you have just enough time to you know, whap a nose cone on it and strap in your brave.
That's the tagline of this game: whap a nose cone on it.
And then, like, once both players kind of, let's say, like, have their hands away from the table, then the player who announced that they were going to launch shakes the table. I quite like, especially the shaking the table thing, because you can do it as gently or as hard as you want, right?
Yeah,
like, you can play it very safe, but then it's likely that your opponents will also stand. And I think you've still got to be on the other side of the Iron Curtain at this point. Or maybe both players have to do it, but the player who announced first goes first, if you see what I mean.
Okay, yeah.
Because I feel like then everyone gets a kind of a fair chance at doing it.
And I guess the fun part about this is that, like, your rocket could lose some parts and not be fully destroyed.
Yeah.
And it's the parts that are left on that will give you, that will contribute to whatever you score in the end.
Your final points. Yeah, and I think that's... So something
This completely sick. Why are we so good at this?
We've had a couple of off weeks, like, we're back on form. So something that I was thinking about with the parts, rather than the junk art style model where, like, there's an exact part that you can go for, I wonder if it's about, like, color coding or something like that, so that you can, you know, grab a red part or a green part with the card, rather than a precise one.
Yeah, I think I'm down for that.
But then you can use your spying ability to, like, see and grab a precise part that your opponent has, or something like that.
Okay, yes.
My thinking behind that being that, like, you don't necessarily want to be able to use one of your powers and then permanently lose access to a particular part.
Okay, yeah.
But you could also then maybe kind of balance the cards against different colours, if you see what I mean. So that, like, I don't know, maybe, like, rules that get you more money are always on the opposite side of yellow parts. Or something. Like, so...
Okay, yeah.
So that, like, if you're aiming to have lots of different colours on your thing, then you have to use lots of different policies, or if you're aiming to have a lot of the same colour, then you can have a lot of similar policies. It might, like, sort of switch up how you play.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
I feel like the core game is pretty much defined here, and we've got 20 minutes to go, so I think it's time to talk like design and visual.
Yeah, I agree. So are you still feeling the kind of like propaganda screen printed like vibe in terms of graphics?
I have to say I am, and I think like I'm definitely seeing it as kind of like a design wise a game of two halves. Like the board is literally divided by what would have to be quite a tall kind of DM screen, a relatively tall DM screen. I feel like the color palette should be relatively limited. I guess red, white, and blue on one side, and maybe like red, white, and yellow, or red, black, and yellow on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, this sort of relatively simplistic screen printed visual language, but you could, in keeping with the sort of historically accurate idea, you could sort of match it to socialist realism on one side and kind of a bit more of a Norman Rockwell kind of Americana feel on the other side.
Yeah.
While still keeping them kind of tied together, not like completely visually divorced from one another, but maybe even kind of playing on the similarities between the two cultures at the time rather than the differences.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about all that?
I think that is going to be very cool looking in terms of graphics because it's quite, it is quite a strong graphical style and that one that's, will like catch the eye. At least, if you're not going too, I guess, dull with it, which has been known.
I can't possibly think what you're referring to, but yes.
But the flip side is that, like, people who do love these, like, old historically accurate, Cold War games will really love that too. I think that we can make it so there's kind of a contrast with like what our actual like pieces and structure look like. I kind of want to make that feel quite fun and not exactly like junk art, but I kind of want it to have that feel like chunky and sort of to some extent colourful, although colourful in kind of like a space machine way.
I totally feel that, and I feel like that what we're looking for with the parts and the structure is maybe something more in kind of like the sort of like Jetsons retro future, space age, like late 1950s, early 1960s shapes. Maybe even in the colours as well, like keep the colours a bit more neutral or different from the sort of nationalistic colours of the two sides, and maybe keep them more in the like teals and oranges or something, so that they have a bit more of a kind of a sort of Jetsons feel to them, maybe.
Yeah, I like that. I was definitely imagining like like your kind of Payne's grey, teal, orange, maybe like a kind of like rusty brown.
Rusty brown would be quite nice, like to kind of reflect the sort of slightly jank nature of it.
And then I like the idea of the parts kind of having like like your little like whatever's going to fit them together, whether it be like a sort of plug with a socket or a groove with a tongue or what have you, but that those elements are going to make the parts kind of feel nice and textured and greebly.
Yeah, I want it to feel nice to handle and nice to stack up. I don't want it to feel too precarious. Like, obviously it being precarious is part of the design, but I don't want this to be like a constant threat of falling down like a game of junk art is. I'd like it to have more of a Jenga-like solidity to it. Because I think, I think you could have good games where both rockets survive launch.
Yeah.
So I'd like that to be sort of facilitated in the design.
Mm-hmm. Everything's going to be kind of solid and everything's going to have at least one like good flat surface that will, like contribute to a stable structure.
Yeah. It's and then it's up to you how hard you shake the table and how much of a risk you take. So, I mean, I guess I want to do a little bit of an acknowledgement, and this is something that, like, we want to make games that are fun. I don't want to miss the point and kind of be like, this is an entirely funny, silly, but also historically accurate game about the Cold War. Like, it was a very politically complex time where a lot of bad things happened all over the world. But I think that the space race is generally one part of it where we can sort of see, this was like a proxy war where overall, both participants were generally acting, scientifically and stuff. Like, it's one of the lighter parts. I am not unaware that, particularly in the Soviet Union, it wasn't always all that light. But, one of the things about historically accurate games, I guess, that bothers me sometimes is thinking about, like, oh, let's make a game about World War II. This, this thing
and what
where...
if it went differently?
Yeah.
Like, let's set it up as though we've thought really hard about historical accuracy and balance, and then...
Yeah, and then we'll play it out.
See what happens.
Yeah. So I kind of... Yeah, I guess I kind of wanted to not leave that unaddressed. Even if, I feel like this is kind of silly enough and light enough. But, we set out to do something that touched on historical accuracy, so I didn't want to, like... I didn't want to talk about historically accurate games without touching on that element of them that's just kind of a bit grody to me. Like, that doesn't feel good. Like...
Yeah. I mean, I think that this is light and maybe a bit silly, but, I think there's precedent for, like, the space race being a thing that's a bit more touchable in that way. And B, like, yeah, it's a little bit gross for any game to try and do some kind of, like, recreating history thing. Like, games are silly and they're a means of fun, and to act like it's super serious when you sit down and play, like, Normandy or whatever, like, it's, it is what it is, and your attitude is important.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, that said, I feel like the only thing that's missing is a title, and I assume there is a game called Space Race.
Yes, there's got to be, right? Board Game Geek, help us out.
Yeah, there absolutely is. So, yeah, I mean, like, you made a joke about using, like, a city name. What do you think? What were you going to suggest?
Oh, I don't know what the right places are. I was thinking, what if it was some like technical term for like the vibrations, right? Like, I don't know if there is a technical term in space exploration for that. I can ask my NASA friend.
So I just looked up where cosmonauts launched from, and it's a place called Baikonur, which is in what is now Kazakhstan, but was then the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic. So, like, Baikonur, we have a problem. Like, sort of smashing together two things. Just Astro Cosmo.
Oh, that's fun.
Astro versus Cosmo?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, this is good. So, today we did, this was our Halloween episode, so we did Trick or Treat. We each bought one mechanic and one theme idea that we liked, and one mechanic and one theme idea that we didn't like. And we flipped 3 tails and a heads, giving us 3 things that we don't like and 1 we do like. Our goal was to make a game that incorporated space exploration, historical accuracy, a points tracker, and putting things on top of other things. The game we have designed is called Astro versus Cosmo. It is a sort of dexterity building game themed around the space race and the Cold War. And over to you for a bit of a description of play.
Okay, so what we have is a largely hidden 2-player versus game where you are building your rocket. There's a kind of asymmetrical element where one side starts with more financial resources and one starts with more manpower. And as you build parts onto your rocket, you are gaining points on the points tracker. Those points can be traded in for like permanent abilities, and those abilities can be mortgaged for the ability to gain certain parts. And at the end of the game, there is a final element where one player will decide that they are ready for launch. The other player gets to finalize their rocket. The table is shaken by both players in turn. And whatever remains on the two structures is what gets scored for final objective points. It's sort of a bit of like an engine builder. It's a bit of a like resource game. It's got a lot going on.
Yeah, it combines some things we really don't like with some things we really do like. I am super surprised by how we were able to make a game that I think sounds really good out of a bunch of ideas that I don't like at all.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So hit us up, Osprey Games. Hire us.
Yeah, for real. We really need to start getting this in front of publishers and just be like, look, we don't want to make the games, but we're really good at having ideas.
Unfortunately, Georgia, I think there might be kind of a lot of people in the hobby gaming space that feel like that.
I don't think their ideas are as good as ours, Miriam. I've seen hobby games. And frankly, very few of them are as good as Astro versus Cosmo.
No, it's so true.
All right.
Apart from the fact that they exist.
Yeah, they do have that one advantage. Well, to our listener, thank you very much for tuning in. Miriam, it's always so much fun.
Yeah, this ruled. You should check out our blogs, where I attempt to hash the very loose job that we do on the podcast into something vaguely more resembling a real outline of a game.
Another thing that's also worth checking out on the blogs is the video episodes that we do if you ever want to see a sort of more visualized version of our process. We have a lot of fun doing those.
Yeah, we did a pretty cool one last time. We made like the next in the Forbidden Co-op Games series.
Yeah, again, we should tell them about that. They might want that.
Yeah, we should tell them. Okay, so without further ado, thank you very much for listening. See you next time.
Caw-caw!